Hi, welcome to Navigating Love and Connection from an Autistic Perspective. My name is Ariana White. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Georgia, founder of Role for Wellness, and a private practice therapist. A little bit more about me: I am an ADHD therapist, ADHD official, autism peer reviewed, and that just means that I have acquired a lot of autistic friends in my life, and we looked at each other and we're like, oh, wow, it's all of us, isn't it? And that's been really valuable and life changing for me, and just the way that I form relationships. In Atlanta Therapeutic Collective, I focus on relationships, a lot of romantic relationships, specifically with folks who are or autistic folks and ADHD folks, or folks who are neurodivergent and with an holistic person. And then in Role for Wellness, I focus on helping neurodivergent, specifically autistic and ADHD folks, find meaningful relationships and take care of their mental health through things like gaming and pop culture. I also am a body positive trained facilitator, and I love working with neurodivergent folks to help improve their self esteem, body image, and just their relationship with themselves and others. And like I mentioned, I love D&D, board games, and just making new friends. So today I'm really hoping to talk about these things, right? Learning some specific communication techniques that I use with clients to help them not only practice direct and clear communication, but receive direct and clear communication, develop personal strategies for setting and maintaining boundaries, explore the unique vulnerabilities that autistic folks face when in relationships, and talking about how to advocate for yourself within those relationships. So why is this important? And I'm sorry, my little bubble covers some of the text, but I'll try to read over it and make sure that you all get that information. So, this is important because 72% of people with autism also meet the diagnostic criteria for post traumatic stress disorder, meaning that they experienced something harmful where they felt out of control and ultimately walked away with some emotional consequences for the situations they experienced. A lot of autistic folks also have complex PTSD as a co occurring diagnosis, which means that they have experienced trauma over a long period of time. And I'll talk more about this later, but they've experienced trauma over a long period of time, and it has affected their ability to make relationships. Autistic folks are also more likely to experience intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And we'll talk about some of those unique vulnerabilities of why that happens. Autistic folks also have been thought to lack empathy, but when we see things like the double empathy problem, we realize that it isn't that they lack empathy, it's that there's a lack of understanding between neurotypicals and neurodivergent folks, and it's, we're having trouble finding the same language to communicate in. One of the references that I'll talk or One of the references that are is in my reference sheet talks about double empathy as looking at social mistakes, miscommunications, misinterpretations, misunderstandings, and mischaracterizations. So like when I'm working with couples clients, this might look like me talking through, like, can we assume the best of your partner? Your partner's autistic and sometimes they can be curt with you, or you feel like they're being curt with you. If we're assuming the best and we know that they are a kind person and characterizing them correctly, how might you receive that message instead? Uh, in addition to some other reasons why they might experience IPV or intimate partner violence more than their neurotypical counterparts, a lot of it is ableism, where they've grown up and not felt like they're worthy, or the way that they approach situations are okay. So they grow up with this thought in their head, like, I feel like I deserve this because who will put up with me? Or like, putting up with me is a sacrifice enough, so I can't ask for what I need in this relationship or be treated well because it's enough that they just want to be my friend or be my partner. Difficulty in social situations. So, just one of the main characteristics that we see in abuse is that isolation, and it can be really difficult for autistic folks who haven't been able to make those meaningful connections to have the support they need to avoid intimate partner violence situations. And then just the lack of what a healthy relationship looks like, because autistic folks can be thought of as like they're not going to be pursuing romantic relationships, or their relationships are going to be very surface level, so they don't get the information that they need to protect themselves. So I want to make clear in this, I'm defining relationships and connection, and this is not just romantic relationships. One of the things that we see are there's a lot of autistic folks in the queer community, and there's things like queer platonic friends, which means that you have a deeper intimate relationship that we would typically think of as a friendship, and they might do things like cohabitate or share children, but it's not the romantic relationship that we typically think of. So I'm using this term relationship very broadly. So a relationship is a connection between two people. A healthy relationship is one that affects both parties positively. Unhealthy is two people that are negatively affected, and then an abusive relationship is one or more of the people involved are harmed by the relationship. So just pointing out, right? Like if it's healthy, you should feel a net positive. If it's unhealthy, you'll likely feel a net negative. And an abusive relationship, there's active harm. So, this whole presentation is grounded in these characteristics of a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship has all of these qualities. They're not always 100% or all of the time, but they are what a healthy relationship would strive for. So, mutual respect and self respect. This comes in a lot when we're going to talk about boundaries later, because people think about boundaries as here are the rules I'm setting, but a lot of times we are the people responsible for advocating, setting those boundaries, and making sure that people are respecting us. And then also, with that, respecting other people and their ability to say no, honesty and trust. So, um, people can tend to think that autistic people are naive, and sometimes they can have trouble, right? Like reading those social cues or that subcontext. And so, in a healthy relationship, right, like you're going to be looking for someone who you trust, who is honest with you, who is direct, is not lying by omission, those kinds of things. Negotiation and compromise. So, there's always kind of wiggle room in a relationship. And we talk a little bit later about like that should be basing your values and your relationship values. It shouldn't feel like you're always sacrificing, or you're not feeling again respected in what you need to be happy in a relationship. Individuality and independence. I work with a lot of young adults, and this is something we talk a lot about like you are allowed to be your own person. You're allowed to have your own time. And with autistic folks, they have been in relationships, and like I say autistic folks, right? And this may not apply. Everything is not going to apply to everyone, but these are some of the challenges that I commonly see in my practice and in the research and the references that I shared. So autistic folks might have like this, their hyperfixation, their special interest, um, that thing that they really love, and they've been made to feel guilty about it because that can feel like that's the only thing you care about, that's your priority. And we work through like you're allowed to have that thing, you're allowed to be an individual, and how do you communicate with your partner what that means for you, and even right like what you mean to them. And I said partner, but I think that's true in all of your relationships and friendships. Communication and understanding. How do you talk through the things that you need? How do you make sure that you're checking for understanding? So, like when we mention things like the double empathy problem, it is helpful to really check understanding to make sure that, like, are we even having the same conversation? Emotional regulation. So, checking in with yourself. Like, do I feel I'm in the space to have these conversations? Am I in the space to show up? Am I noticing that my sensory issues are being activated right now and I am not in the place to regulate? Problem solving and conflict resolution, just how it sounds, right? Like, this is the person who I value in my life. I trust them. So I'm going to work to a solution with them. Assertiveness and boundaries, and just indicating assertiveness is different than aggressiveness, and we'll share some specific skills to talk through like what assertiveness can look like. Equality, and sometimes I tell clients, right, like if it's not equality, we're thinking about equity, because we all need different things in relationships, and it's important to have that communication, that honesty, and trust so that I can communicate what I need and how that might be different from what you need. Safety and comfort, shared values, and pleasure. And I think another good example of like what that might look like as far as like equity in a healthy relationship, uh, the expectation, right, is that people assign female at birth, they want flowers, they want chocolate as a gift. And this might be something where the person is like, I want to show you my love for you. I want to show you the pleasure that you bring me. And it might be necessary to communicate that like I don't like chocolate and I think flowers are silly because they die, right? Like you wouldn't say it like that, but you want to be able to communicate and feel confident that like if I tell my friends that don't get me flowers and chocolate to cheer me up, that won't do it, they can listen without taking it personally. Part of relationships are the principles of sexual health. And these are still true whether or not you're having sex. So, a lot of folks in the neurodivergent community also identify as asexual, and asexual isn't just sex repulsed. Sex can look a lot of different ways in your life, and having these principles can be really helpful in navigating sexual situations and deciding if they are the ones you want for yourself. So, consent, right? We talk about an enthusiastic consent, and it doesn't always look that way for autistic folks, right? They may not be as visually expressive, they may not show up in the way that neurotypicals expect in a sexual situation. So, it's important to talk about like what consent might look like for you. Uh, in some ways, even right, like if I am experiencing too much sensory stimulation, it might be hard for me to give an excited yes because I'm navigating all of these situations. So I'm going to talk to you about like, this is what my consent looks like. This is what it sounds like. This might be how my body responds. So you know that I'm still enjoying it, even if I can't say yes. Non exploitative. So that's without guilt, that's without coercion, again feeling like I can say yes, I can say no without feeling like there will be other consequences to my relationship. Honest. So I think about the example of if you want to have sex for fun, that's okay to have sex for fun. You don't have to tell people that you want a relationship. You don't have to tell people that you want to have kids. You People deserve that honesty so they can make decisions about their sexual health and the sex they want to have or not have with you or not. Shared values again, so that kind of goes like, are you having sex for funsies? Are you having sex because you want to have kids? What does that look like? And do you all understand how your values align or don't? Pleasure. I can't tell you how many folks feel like they are supposed to have sex and don't realize that they are supposed to enjoy sex. And then the protection from STIs, HIV, and unwanted pregnancy. And right, like all of these things go together. You want to be able to talk about safe sex practices and what that looks like and what's your level of risk when engaging in these practices. So speaking through like what does it look like to have an unhealthy relationship? These factors come up in almost like what's the word? In cycles. So unhealthy relationship, you may feel like you can't do anything without your partner. Your partner makes all of the decisions, and or your friend, right? Like we see that in some folks, they have like a group of friends. There's that one friend who makes all of the decisions, and there situations where that one friend might be disrespectful to I mean really anyone, but right in this case we're talking about autistic folks, so they might like infantilize them or make fun of them when they take something literally and everyone doesn't. And when I think about these characteristics, right, like it's not always this is unhealthy, cut it off immediately, but sometimes it is, and sometimes it is how do I have a conversation with someone that I care about that talks to them about the ableism and how they're treating me and how it's not making me feel welcomed. Intimidation. So, like, no one else will be your friend. I'm as kind to you as anyone would be. Some of these phrases that can be really isolating, really challenge that autistic person's view of themselves and what they feel like is okay. Here's some other red flags. And again, right, when we think about red flags, they're things to keep in your mind and watch for. Probably need a conversation, but it is up to you, right? Like, is not well liked by your friends. As an autistic person, you might meet someone who like adores you and you adore them and you all feel like you speak the same language and the other friends don't understand. So it's not like an immediate, oh, you got to cut off this relationship, but it is, am I thinking about what's actually going on? Are they not well liked because they don't understand me, or are they not well liked because this person's only nice to me and they're not nice to anyone else around me? Are they nice to like wait staff and like service workers, those kinds of things? Red flags, texting calls you all the time. And right, this is again like, what's the conversation? What's the expectation of the relationship? So, like, there's, those unwritten rules of you shouldn't text someone back to back. But for an autistic person, and maybe even like myself with like ADHD, I love when you text me back to back because half the time I forgot that I didn't respond. I opened it, I responded in my head and didn't actually talk to you. So I need those double texts. So again, it's the relationship, it's the context of the situation, tries to control what you do or who you see, right? Like, those are one of those things where it's like, oh no, like I'm my own person. I have my own autonomy. This person shouldn't be controlling me, versus the things like texting or calling that could have some more flexibility. And then characteristics of an abusive relationship. So, an intentional use of force with the potential for causing harm, injury, disability, or death. Sometimes we see people who are like, well, they just grabbed me, so it's not physical abuse, or they just, pushed me off of them. And those things still would count as physical abuse. Verbal abuse, insults, criticism, name calling. I can see, excuse me, or I have seen where people will give what they are presenting as nicknames, but it's actually they're making fun of them or being cruel or derogatory. And because that person is autistic, who the comments are being aimed at, people will be like, well, you're taking it too seriously, or that's a term of endearment when it's really not. Emotional abuse, so the psychological trauma caused by threats, coercive tactics, no one wants to be your friend, you're so weird, who else will like you, those kinds of things. And then, of course, sexual abuse, which is non consensual sexual contact. So one of the things I wanted to share was kind of the cycle of abuse, because we hear it all the time where it's like, well, they're nice to me, or they said sorry, and it follows the cycle of abuse. So the tension building, um, feeling anxious, feeling fearful, always trying to think about what you're doing and how you show up because you don't want to anger that person. That's a telltale sign if you don't feel safe enough to share your views, to share your opinions without fear of this person being harmful. We're looking at an abusive relationship, or at the very least, an unhealthy one. The incident, the thing that triggers the abuse, reconciliation, I'm so sorry, you made me act this way, and then the calm, where it's like, well, this is the person I fell in love with. This is why I show up. This is why I'm here. So I'm not going to share or play this video for the sake of time, but Interview with a Vampire is one of my favorite shows and also a good example of like how I use media in work. It's a good example of what an abusive relationship looks like. And it goes through the cycles of we're happy, we're happy. You did something to trigger me. I didn't talk about it. I didn't use communication skills. Um, the show's worth the watch to see the whole thing, but this is definitely a good example of how things can really escalate in a relationship. So, what are some unique challenges of autistic? Well, we're talking about autistic women, right? Primarily. So, one of them is rejection sensitive dysphoria. So, this is an intense reaction to the rejection or the perception of it. It can lead to social anxiety, difficult in social situations, avoidance of those situations. It can look like, especially in making new friends, let's say that you're in a group, like let's say you're in a dance group and everyone goes out to dinner after dance. They didn't invite you to the group chat where everyone talked about dance. Whether or not it was intentional, it feels very personal and can cause you to say, like, no one in this dance class likes me. No one wants to be my friend. I don't even know if I want to go to dance anymore without really checking the reality of it. And it's hard, right? Because for an autistic person, it may be the reality. They may be intentionally leaving you out, but they could also just have not added you because you were new and they forgot, or a number was off. And it's difficult to manage your emotions when you're not sure which one that is. And it can be hard to maintain relationships. It can also look like codependency in a relationship because you are so afraid of that rejection, that negative view of yourself, that you were doing anything and everything to try to prevent conflict or irritating that person or offending that person that you're with. Another kind of unique challenge, and I will say that some of these are common in autism and ADHD. And because they're so co occurring, I didn't separate them because I think it's just good knowledge to think about and know. So, another one is PDA, also known as pathological demand avoidance. So, may exhibit a fight, flight, freeze response when confronted with demands that challenge their independence. So, for me, this looks like my husband might be like, "Are you going to change the litter?" And depending on how he says it in the mood, I'm like, "I'm already going to do the litter. Like, I know that's my job. Why are you bringing it up?" And then I won't change the litter for 4 days. And I've been able to be more aware of it and we've been able to have more conversations about it. But, right, like, if something was stressful at work or the fan is too loud or the house smells weird, I might not have that same ability to show up and recognize, oh, that's what's happening. And these are the consequences of when PDA shows up. Complex PTSD is another thing that's not directly autism, but definitely related because it originates from the ongoing escape and inescapable relational trauma. So, right, like this might be abuse from family who don't understand you. It could be long term bullying. And the important part about this is that the symptoms can look really similar. The symptoms can look really similar to a lot of other things that are co occurring with autism or autism itself, right? Like you have difficulty with emotional regulation. You may have difficult with identity and sense of self. And I see this a lot with clients when we talk about unmasking. And they're like, I don't even know what unmasking would be because I've had to survive so long that this person that I've created, I don't know if it's me or what's not me. Just difficulty maintaining relationships because what comes with long-term relational abuse, right, can be mistrust, could be feelings of shame or guilt, like, am I the problem? And then challenges with executive functioning, which is something that I think we don't talk a lot about in relationships, but can be really difficult to manage because you may have different levels of executive functioning at different times. And especially in a relationship with someone that a different neurotype than you, like I'm ADHD and my partner's autism, like these look very different, but they feel similar enough that we can have conflict because we don't understand what's that person's thing. So for me, I'm really good at time management until I'm not. So with my partner, it can be really frustrating when I'm like, hey, pick me up at 9. And in my head, I'm like, okay, 9 means that's when he's leaving. But I said, pick me up at 9. So he's going to be there at 9. And then the frustration and the communication that needs to come because we were misaligned in what we were trying to communicate. The other thing that makes it hard to have healthy relationships and show up and find the people who are your people is masking. And I kind of group these together: masking, camouflage, and compensation. So masking can be things like hiding traits that appear more autistic, like stimming. It could be camouflaging. So, like, I'm going to act like the neurotypicals act. And then compensation might be adopting new strategies. So, before I knew that I was autistic and ADHD, I had my friends would joke and say my schedules had schedules because I was overcompensating to make sure that no one knew how much I was struggling. I like to think of this whole category as like I'm cosplaying as human. And when you're cosplaying as human, it can be really hard to find and have the energy to find the relationships that feel best for you. So now we're going to talk about boundaries and communication, right? How do you find those relationships? How do you keep those relationships? And how do you make sure that you feel good in those relationships? So, one of those things is how do you unmask? So, some examples of unmasking is practicing saying no, expressing disagreement. As Black women, we often get the like, well, you're angry, you're irritable. Do it anyway, right? And this is still thinking through safety, right? Because some spaces you are not safe. You got to keep your job. You can't always say the things you want to, but in other spaces you can. And when you have those moments, do it, right? Because it gives you a little bit more energy, a little bit more capacity to be yourself and feel good about who you are. Let your face do what it does. Um, I'm one of those folks. So, we talk about autistic people and we talk about flat affect, but that's not me. My face is always expressing exactly what I'm thinking. And I used to try really hard to hide that, and I can't. It just is what it is. And I've had to learn like how to talk through it with people because they'll make assumptions about what I'm feeling or why I'm showing up the way that I am. And it goes to like the next one, right? Don't guess other people's emotions and don't let them guess yours either. So I think being autistic and having that stigma of like we can't understand social situations or social context, that we often again like try to compensate and read the room and figure out if it's safe or not for us. And that's valid and it's very important because of the culture and the society we live in. But in those relationships where we're creating safety and we're creating connection, how do we teach people to love us in a way that says, for us to be in a loving, healthy relationship, I need you to tell me how you feel, because I'm gonna, my RSD is gonna be activated and I'm gonna guess you hate me. So it would feel so good if you can just say, hey, Ari, like I'm having a down day. I just need some time to myself. And I can give you that without guessing the context or internalizing your emotional experience. And then Stimwin feels good. One of the things that I have found really valuable is a crystal girly. So I love the calming rubbing stones. And when I do presentations, I've been able to show up a lot better because I always have my little common stone with me. One of the other things that we use a lot to help kind of figure out what are the boundaries I need, how do I want to communicate, how do I want to show up in this relationship, are values. So there's a tons of different modalities in therapy that use values. I specifically use acceptance and commitment therapy, but there's tons of them. So I included some links so that you all can explore your values. They're in the resource list as well. And I'm going to talk about like how you can use values to communicate your boundaries. So one of the things again is boundaries are about how you will protect yourself, how you teach people how to love you. They're not rules or requests that you put on other people to change their behavior. So for me, when I think about my core values, I often think about autonomy, authenticity, connection, and integrity. So with autonomy, right, like I value autonomy. So I need alone time. So I will schedule time without my partner. Because what I've noticed about myself is I will get very anxious and very depressed because I'm trying to make these connections that are very valuable to me, but they also don't necessarily give me energy back. So I need to make sure that I have my alone time to recharge. So authenticity, um, I need to be myself with all of my relationships. I don't make friends at this point with people who I don't feel like I can be my full self with, and that means to test that, right, I will talk about when I feel insecure or judged. I've had a friend for a long time and we would show up and like we'd do video calls and she'd be like, ugh, like what are you wearing? And I'm like, that really hurts my feelings. It makes me feel insecure and it makes me feel like you just want me as a friend to make yourself feel better. And how people respond to that tells you a lot of information about, is that a healthy relationship? A lot of people may shut down because that's a new way to communicate. But I have found that like people who want to be in your life of value, they come back and they've listened and they show up differently. Connection. So I value connection. I need uninterrupted time. So that means I will communicate when I'm feeling that way, right? Like sometimes parallel play when I'm playing my Switch and he's watching TV feels really good, but other times I need something else. Like I need to go to dinner with no phones and need to talk about if we're, living in a simulation or not. Some other examples are, I value supportiveness, so I need explicit messaging. So for that, I'll ask my friend if they want support or problem solving, right? So I value being the person who people can go to, but that can be problematic because I can try to solve their problems, I cannot listen or show up in the way that they need. So I need to know that for me to be the friend that I want to be and live in alignment with my values, I'm going to have to ask questions. I'm going to need them to explicitly tell me how they need me to show up in this space. Some other examples that can be really helpful in like setting boundaries and communicating what you need in a relationship. This is a DBT skill called Dear Man. So if you're in an argument with your friend, um, the one that comes to mind is like if your friend doesn't text you back, right? Like we can tell ourselves stories about, well, she didn't respond for 2 days, so she doesn't value the friendship, and she likes so and so more. And in truth, like that was a lot of feelings, that was a lot of thoughts, but not the objective facts of the situation. So it might look like I felt really hurt when you didn't respond to me for 2 days, and I understand that you're busy, but I'd really appreciate it if in the future you just gave me a heads up, like, hey, I can't talk right now. Um, and even ask your friend, right? Like, historically, we talk back and forth a lot. So when that changes, give me a heads up. Or if you just want the expectation in our relationship that I don't expect for you to respond right away, that's been taxing on you and I never knew. Let's talk about that because that's okay too. Like, I'm okay with changes when I know what the expectations of our relationship are. Another one, this is a Gottman skill. Um, and it talks through how you talk through a conflict in a relationship. So it's a lot of the similar skills, right? Like, I have noticed that um, the dishes aren't done, and I'd really appreciate it if you did them before bed, right? Like you're asking for something specific. You're not saying like, "Hey, you never do the dishes," or being critical. You are saying like, "This is what I noticed. This is what I need. How do we talk through things changing in the future?" One of the important things about conflict is like recognizing your own emotional uh, experience. So like in a conflict, your friend, your partner, whoever might be like, "Hey, you know what? My bad. I I've been really tired this week and I could have communicated that better." Some people might respond with like, "We're all tired," right? That would be an example of like we're not receiving that repair attempt because the person is trying to take responsibility, but we're so caught up in our own anger, our own feelings about the situation, we're not hearing that they want to repair, they want to move forward with this. And that might mean like you need a break, you need to soothe, you need to self soothe so you can recognize, right? In conflict, it feels overwhelming. It feels that this is always how things are going to be. And that's not the case. And often taking that break can help recenter us. And then process lasting grievances. So sometimes you find a solution to this conflict, but it shows you some other things. Or, right, like you were a little snippy, you were a little rude. There's things like the aftermath of a fight that talks you through how do I have this discussion in a way that feels helpful? How do I recognize what triggered me, what triggered you, and how do we um, change that pattern moving forward? Combating rejection sensitive dysphoria. So, a lot of this I think about as like, how do you build the communities that you want to live in? So, like, how do you create trust and safety in your relationships? So, you know, canceling plans might be something that can be really triggering for RSD. And can you communicate and have friends in your life who say that, like, hey, you know what? I'm really burnt out. I love you, I love you, I love you, but I need to cancel these plans. And excuse me, you respond okay to that. And when you have to do it, they respond as well. And you continue those connections, right? You cancel, but you reschedule. Uh, Also, embrace the cringe, right? One of the things that can happen with RSD is you feel pressure to not be yourself or show up to fit into spaces. And like, I think about embrace the cringe is like celebrate the weirdness in your friend group, celebrate the things that are awkward, those weird moments, because it's really human, right? So like practicing that authenticity, seeking out people who are as excited about the things that you are. Like I mentioned, my obsession is Interview with a Vampire, the TV series right now. I went to a PowerPoint party a couple weeks ago where everyone was excited about people being excited. So normally, like I probably wouldn't have done that because I'm like, oh, this is so cringe. Like you're a therapist spending your personal time to do more therapy about these two characters, but it was embraced, it was excited, and it's like, how do you find those people? Set your boundaries and ask for what you need. So, like we said, what do you value? How do you ask for it? Um, what are the changes you will make to create that environment? And then practice mindfulness, recognizing like, am I responding to what's going on right now? Like they said something that hurt me and I need to speak to a specific need, or am I responding to every friend that has betrayed me before and I'm having a hard time separating what they said from what other people have done to me before? This is another skill that can just be really helpful for autistic folks who have trouble with like the back and forth of conversation. It's called the stress reducing conversation. So it's another example of a Gottman skill that it's like, okay, my partner needs support, not advice, not problem solving. How do I do this? So these are the specific steps. So make sure you're taking turns. Don't give advice unless they ask for it. Show interest. So it says in general, right? Like, don't let your mind or eyes wander. And this may look different, right? There's a difference between like, I just don't want to look at you, or I can't look at you, or I don't like eye contact, versus like I am playing my game while they're trying to have a certain conversation with me. And also, right, like letting them know one of the things that's important and kind of the basis, or one of the basis of like a lot of the Gottman things, are that like you understand your partner's world. So you would understand, like, is this my stuff? Or are they really not engaged? Again, making sure you communicate your understanding and you are actually um, showing up in the way that they need and understanding what is stressing them out. One of the things that can be really hard for myself included, is taking your partner's side. I think a lot of times with thinking about like autistic folks, like sense of justice and like wanting to be specific about the details, that we can lose the importance of taking your partner's side. And this is not the same as like lying to them, right? Like if my partner went into work and started a fight and was dead wrong, I'm going to validate the feelings, right? Like I'm going to validate, I understand that you're so frustrated. I understand that they weren't listening to you, but I'm not going to necessarily encourage that like you went into work and cuss someone out. But I am going to be supportive of like your emotional experience and like how people may have caused you harm. You just, you want to know that someone has your back. And I think that's an important part of the stress reducing conversation is how do you make sure that you're centering that person and their experience. And right, like a lot of times this is another thing where like I like to use TV examples for, because sometimes it may be hard to like empathize with your partner because they're too close and like they did that annoying thing that they do to you at work and it had these consequences. But right, like what if it was your friend? Like what if it was um I'm blanking right now on a TV show, but like what if it was someone else who was doing this thing? How do you show up and support them without judging them, without criticizing them, without um trying to be right? So that's my presentation. Thank you all so much for listening. The QR code takes you to my website. Always interested in talking more about this. And then my resources are all here, and I'm happy to email anyone If you contact me on my website, I can get you any of these. Thanks again. Bye.